Hello, this is Linda Vettrus-Nichols, and do I have an amazing person to introduce to you, Sophie Jacobs. Welcome, Sophie.
Welcome, Linda. Thanks for inviting me. Excited to be
Absolutely.
on.
Yay, great to have you.
hmm
All right, so you have a super interesting story of transformation. It's really quite wild, and a lot of it just recently happened in the last few years. So fill us in.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's hard to sometimes know when to start the story, but I
Right?
often start it at the point right before my house burned down. So
Whoa.
yeah, I graduated college right during the pandemic and came back to my mom's place to finish up graduation. I was doing school online, and then I lived there for another couple of months after graduation, just figuring out what I was going to be doing. I ended up joining a startup. And while all that was happening, we were having one of the worst years of wildfires in California.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yeah. And in August of 2020, there were multiple dry lightning strikes in the area, which caused a lot of different fires in neighboring counties. Now, none of them were extremely close, but it kind of left us all on edge. And I was home alone at the time. I received a dead bird on the doorstep that day.
What?
And for some reason, that sort of signaled something to me like an omen. And
Yeah.
I buried it. And when I was walking back into the house, there was some sort of knowingness or a feeling tone of, oh no, like
Wow.
as
Ominous.
if life was being drained out from under my feet. And so
Thanks.
yeah, so later that night, I suppose I had an intuition, a knowing to just leave. So I
Yeah.
left with my two dogs and kind of just took a backpack with me and never came back. And I heard the next day, a couple hours later after I left, the whole house was just decimated. A fire NATO actually went through, and just ripped through the whole property. And a couple people on my street even died. And
Wow.
so that experience really brought into focus my life and
Right.
kind of distilled to me like what is it that you want to do with your life. Life is precious,
Uh-huh.
and not only is life precious, but something just happened here. Something just
Yeah.
happened in which your own body communicated something to you that saved your life. What is that?
Mm,
What
so
is
cool.
that? And so
Hello.
for me, it was just like it became this fascination of what was it within me that knew? And
Yeah. There you
that
go.
kind of became the guiding force of my life without even having the language for it. And that brought me to kind of recenter what my priorities were, which was kind of I really wanted to focus on my spiritual life. So I actually went and studied and lived at a Buddhist monastery for about a year. I
Wow.
ordained as a nun for 3 months. And during that time, it became even clearer that, you know, this sort of intelligence within, this sort of
Right.
discernment was really important when we're on a path of awakening, so to speak. It's
Yeah.
really important to distill what's true for us and to cut out kind of the noise. Um,
Sure.
so that became a major theme. And then, one night while I was on retreat at the monastery, this thought just landed in my head 3 times, which is, I should write a book about intuition.
Oh.
And a lot of times, it's hard to say when a thought carries a certain weight and when it's just a thought. For
Mm.
some reason, the fact that that thought came in threes and there was just some particular energetic resonance to that thought.
Right.
And I was quiet enough in my own being on retreat, that I could hear that that lingering calling within the thought to just inch maybe one a centimeter closer to that reality.
Yeah.
It was just this, huh, I wonder what would happen if
Huh.
I did that. That's kind of silly, but
Curiosity and
huh,
creativity.
aha, I wonder. And so, really, what started out as a series of journal entries around intuition, around insight, around inner knowing became not just a book, but my life. So I
Wow.
dedicated more than a year of my life to this theme
Yeah.
that's almost like unspeakable, but and ethereal and immaterial, and yet it had such a force in my life, and that's kind of
Right.
the momentum that my life is taking me now.
That
And
is so
so
cool.
yeah, so I wrote a book, and it's called The Intuition Experiment, because all of this was experimental. So a
Yeah.
lot of times, memoirs employ a backwards looking approach. Well, in my book, I actually everything is in real time.
Yeah.
Only parts of stories that I had written in my childhood were in past tense, but this experiment took a real time approach because I really wanted to share with people that I didn't have all the answers,
Yeah.
but I was very earnest in exploring them, and not to coming to any sort of conclusion about them, but to really just explore it for myself.
Love it.
Um, so that just felt important for me to bring in that aspect and that style of writing for people to maybe have more of a relatability with it, rather than feel that someone is telling them how they should know, how they should um, gather their own sort of wisdom. So
Right. Yeah,
yeah.
that's so cool. Much needed right now. And so many people have awakened and come in touch with that part of themselves and are moving forward with it and awakening even more, which is super exciting.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, there is a different energy. I call it the energy of the new world. And
Hmm.
it's very powerful to be in touch with that piece of you. So thank you for the work
Mhm.
that you're doing in the world. And also, Sophie, just on a personal level note, whatever the word is, you weren't raised to like in the church, if you will. You weren't raised with even much of a spirituality, or you were raised more with spirituality. You weren't raised with religion. How do you describe your upbringing that way? And then you didn't like join the Catholic Church either, because you said none, but
Mm.
you were with the monks. And so
Mhm.
just fill us in a little bit more on that piece of you.
Absolutely. So, yeah, you're right. I did not grow up religious. My mom was a religious studies major, so she did have an interest in religions, but almost from like
Yeah,
uh, an outward looker perspective.
sure.
Um, and I mean, the only time I remember us going to church was at the Universalist Unitarian. I think I'm saying that right. And what I remember is watching Cox New Groove, which is just a movie, and playing memory game and eating donuts.
Oh,
So,
funny.
I mean, that's kind of the impression that experience left on me. So I
Okay.
don't really remember having any sort of conditioning or background around religion, only that I grew up in an environment where academia, where science was really almost reified like a religion. And
Right.
in that aspect, I was implicitly taught to kind of look down at religion,
Okay.
or to like see religion as like, oh, well, wouldn't that be nice? Wouldn't that be
Ah,
like, I've always kind of growing up related to it as like a kooky or misguided thing that
sure.
humans do.
Right.
And but my own kind of path kind of wouldn't let me um continue.
Denying spirituality, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I love
Hmm.
that.
So
That's so
yeah, I
good.
mean, I grew up not having the language for what I was connected to and what I was thinking and experiencing, but the more I lived my life, the more I
Yeah.
realized, oh, there's something here and there's
Yeah.
something that needs to be explored. And I mean, it ended up being that
Uh,
I went to a Buddhist monastery. Um, though really my aspirations were for like mental cultivation through meditation and learning about kind of the Buddhist philosophy and teachings. I was less inspired by the form and the institutional religious aspect of it, although
sure.
I just wanted to have the experience of what is it like to really commit to yourself in religious life. I've never had that
Yeah.
experience, so let's just go for it.
Yeah, you
So,
had started living at the level of your soul, and the soul is here to experience the experience. I just think that's so cool. And we were just chatting about Desmond Tutu and his friendship with the Dalai Lama and how they, got to see each other in person again. And it's
mhm.
just so beautiful on Netflix.
Oh,
You
that made
remember
me
the name
cry
of it?
so many times. I think it's something about joy.
Yeah, it is. Oh dear. Can't think right now.
Well,
It's a very cool.
there was a joy summit, and then they
Oh, yeah.
had this screening of the film for free for like 48 hours, and they had different workshops. It was this like huge thing. Actually, Dr. Z was the one who shared it with me. He
Really?
shared the Global Joy Summit, and
Cool.
that's how I saw the film. And yeah,
Right?
really interested me.
I really appreciated a lot of camera time with Desmond Tutu's daughter to get that aspect of him.
Mhm.
Yeah, and she's like, yeah, those two get together and the 8-year-old boys come out.
Yeah,
That was a
I thought it was
riot,
so funny. And
right?
you
And
can
they're
see
so
it.
cute.
You
Yeah,
can
and they're
see it when you see them interact. It's like it's
it
hilarious.
is a riot. And yeah, talk about like coming from completely different religions and backgrounds, and one was dirt poor, Desmond Tutu, and in South Africa, and the Dalai Lama's living in this really rich, what would it be, like a temple, but it's like a
Yeah.
castle idea. Yeah. And oh yes, so much. And their stories touched each other so deeply.
Mm.
Yeah, it's worth a lot. Okay, so then the idea of entanglement of intelligence. What would you say, like a definition of that is? Where'd that come from your background
Um,
or where you're at
I would
now?
I would say where I'm at now, that this idea of entanglement of intelligence is really just getting at the idea that um intelligence is a living, breathing thing, and it connects us to life itself. Life itself is connected, it's
Yeah, man.
interconnected. And so there's many streams of knowing.
Okay.
I think we in the West at this particular time and place have been brought up to specifically focus on like cognitive knowing,
Right.
rational knowing, and
Mm-hmm.
there's nothing wrong with it at all.
Yeah.
It's just that when we're only given one form of knowing and told that that's the highest form of knowing and told that that's the only form of knowing
Right.
that matters,
Yeah.
then we've started to really disconnect ourselves from life, actually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And
man.
it's actually, I think, one of the roots of how, at the level of consciousness that we're at in the world right now, um, we're trying to solve kind of this whole climate crisis with the same level of consciousness that views intelligence in one way, that it's the same level of consciousness that caused it.
Right.
So I really think what's needed is actually like a reorientation to what does it even mean to know something.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's beautiful. Oh, this has been so juicy. Thank you so much, Sophie. I really appreciate it.
Oh, I appreciate sharing it. It's so cool to have the platform.
I know, right? Yeah, this has
Yeah.
been great.